their situation.
Who are these?
These are some of the key characters in the fight for civil rights.
Hang on, I've seen that face before. Who's that?
Martin Luther King is one of the most inspiring leaders in the fight for equal rights. He led non-violent protests against segregation in the United States.
So what was life like when you were growing up?
Well, in my days in Atlanta as a child, there was a pretty strict system of segregation. For instance, I could not use the swimming pool, so that for a long, long time I could not go in swimming until the YMCA was built, a Negro YMCA, and they had a swimming pool there. But certainly a Negro child in Atlanta could not go to any public park. I could not go to the so-called white schools. There were separate schools. And I attended a high school in Atlanta, which was the only high school for Negroes in the city. And this was a real problem because in Atlanta there are more than 200,000 Negroes. In many of the stores downtown, to take another example, I could not go to a lunch counter to buy a hamburger, a cup of coffee, or something like that.
When he grew up, one of the first things he protested about was the way black people were treated on the buses.
Negroes were treated in a very discourteous manner. The first 10 seats were reserved for whites only. And even if Negro passengers packed the buses and the other seats, and there were no more seats left other than these seats reserved for whites only, Negro passengers could not sit there.
Couldn't people do anything about it?
This is someone who did. One day in 1955, Rosa Parks got on a bus and sat down where she was supposed to sit, in the colored section. When the bus got full, the driver told her to give up her seat for a white man.
So what did you do?
I refused to, and the reason for my doing so was that I didn't want them to know that I was satisfied with the way we were being treated, and that we were not being treated any better, because the more that we endured that treatment, the worse some of the drivers would treat us on the buses. That was when the driver had me arrested and taken to jail.
So what happened after that?
Pretty soon after she was arrested, the word got around the Montgomery community, and there was a spontaneous reaction. More than 99% of the Negro people of Montgomery rose up with a bit of righteous indignation. And this led to the bus boycott. The Negro citizens decided not to ride the buses until these conditions were changed. They asked me to serve as a spokesman, and from this time, I found myself in a leadership position in the civil rights struggle.
For over a year, 18,000 black Americans refused to get on a bus.
How did people get to work if they didn't go on the buses?
Well, we had a carpool, and people who had cars would give other people rides, and of course not charge them anything. And of course with the mass meetings that we had, they would raise money, and finally they raised enough money to buy some station wagons. Those station wagons were used in the carpool.
Did anyone try to stop you?
The officials, city officials, well, they did many things. They arrested people, and sometimes they would harass them. And it was quite a hard time that we went through, but we were determined not to give in to their demands. we were arrested over again, those of us, along with Dr. Martin Luther King, for putting the bus company out of business. So that was the second time I was arrested, once for riding the bus and another time for not riding the bus.
Eventually, the Supreme Court of the United States declared the Alabama state bus laws were illegal. Martin Luther King went on to organize more nonviolent action. All over the country, people realized they could do something about their own situation.
What's going on there?
Students staged a sit-in at their local restaurant, which had a policy of not serving black people. The students were physically assaulted, but they continued to sit in every day and were joined by more and more students who staged similar sit-ins at other restaurants. In 6 months, segregation was ended in the restaurants.
They stage a sit-in demonstration outside his restaurant.
What's happening here?
The start of the Negro March on Washington had no central point. They came with their white sympathizers from every point on the compass. Their primary aim, a full program of civil rights to be quickly enacted and equal job opportunities.
This was the biggest rally ever organized by the civil rights workers. 250,000 people gathered in Washington to hear Martin Luther King demand civil rights.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when it happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Other people were also leading protests at this time. One of these was Malcolm X.
Why is he called X? That can't be his real name.
Malcolm X refused to use the surname he'd been given at birth because he said it was just the name given to his family by a white slave owner. Instead, he chose to call himself X. He showed people that the fight for equal rights was very closely linked to the history of slavery.
And we can never acquire human dignity until we eliminate that which stands in the way of us and our dignity. The man that kidnapped us and brought us here, who made a slave out of us, who hung us on trees. Because we intend to fire our people up so much until if they can't have their equal share in the house, they'll burn it down.
I'd love to speak to him.
America is a white man's country, a country that was stolen by the white man from the dark-skinned Indians. They intimidated our people, as I said, and brought us here in chains to work and build and make this country a wealthy nation, not for the black people, but for the white people. There's no such thing as freedom in this country for the black man. And there's no such thing as equality in this country for the black man. This is a white man's country.
After Malcolm X was killed in 1965, his ideas were carried on by Stokely Carmichael, who first used the phrase Black Power.
Stokely Carmichael. In this country, you were to think that white people were God, that they had the right to give us our freedom. The fight for black power in this country is indeed a fight to civilize a barbaric country, the United States. We have to be able to gather the strength to say, we are black, our noses are broad, our lips are thick, our hair is nappy, and we are beautiful, and we are beautiful.
People were inspired by these ideas to be proud of themselves and to demand equal rights.
What's going on here?
Equal rights included the right to vote.
What they're trying to do is intimidate these people, and by making them stand in the raid, keep them from registering to vote.
In the South, black people had been discouraged from voting for many years, but they refused to be frightened any longer.
You can turn your back on me, but you cannot turn your back upon the idea of justice. You can turn your back now and you can keep the club in your hand, but you cannot beat down justice. And we will register to vote because as citizens of these United States, we have the right to do it.
I'm looking down the line, seeing all the people who've been in jail for felonies. That's what I'm looking at.
Precisely right. And if they're not fit to vote, you'll be able to find that out. But you'll not know it until they're on the registrar. And many of those have a felony action because Sheriff Clark made them a felony action, not because they were rightfully misused. All right, here I am. I'm standing here. Now I have a right according to Judge Thomas's order to be here. Come on, let us go.
When black children first went into white schools, they had to be escorted in by armed guards. Mobs gathered at the school gate to try and stop them. But black people won their fight for equal education and for other civil rights. America had to give in.
What's this?
One reason for the success of the civil rights movement was that the protests embarrassed the government. The United States thought of itself as the most democratic country in the world. A major embarrassment came at the 1968 Olympics, which was watched by millions of people worldwide. The runners, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, won medals. They used the medal ceremony to show that they supported the Black Power movement in the United States.
The new world record.
Before the Games, of course, there was a lot of talk about Black Power demonstrations, and this is when it happened, when those two went up for the victory celebration.
What made you do it?
We used this so the whole world could see the poverty of the black man in America.
It's 30 years since Tommy Smith made his protest, and 500 years since black people were brought to the Americas. Since that time, through their courage and determination, black people have changed American society and forced the world to recognize their success and achievements.
Just as you, as it takes 2 eyes to make a pair.